power supply?
No, I mean, the only time we would ever work on Saturdays is
storage.
Deadline was the next week or whatever, and you needed to get.
And a water cooler.
So
Yeah.
that would be steady enough and income to
I know that.
stay there. So I'm not in there.
I saw that.
Yeah, I heard of that.
Adaptation.
Oh, is it Norway?
The ability to learn from past experience.
Yeah.
The use of knowledge to alter their environment. These virtues defined our creators.
We'll check to make sure too. Oh, we don't.
Of destruction.
There we go.
So yeah, so I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I still haven't been able to solve the issue of Unreal with laptop unplugged.
Yeah, that sounds like just a hardware I/O issue.
Yeah, it works fine when it's plugged in, so it's got to be something with power.
I have several people that come in and they'll just
Or it tries to switch from the onboard video to the graphics card. And it just flips.
That was when I could easily, I didn't have any responsibilities like that. I was a performer that I could have easily, and if that were to happen.
Did you make it to GDC?
Not this year. Yeah, not with a newborn. That was a little tough.
Oh, that's right. Newborn.
Yep. Yep. Next year we're going for sure. In fact, we've been looking at doing like a co-op booth up there. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be running these days to finish that out.
I'm definitely going to try to go.
I have a couple jobs.
Yeah, it's. Have you ever been before?
Not to that one.
It's
when they had one down in Austin, I went to that.
Yeah, that one was.
More mobile.
Yeah.
But it wasn't back then. But I think
Yeah, they tried to make GC Austin, and that didn't. People were just too used to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Put together some of these. And so you guys have seen most of this. I'll leave those up there. This would be great if it's just you guys.
Sure.
That'll be pretty relaxed. No judgment. Maybe people like walked outside and realized it was nice and like, we're staying home today. This is too nice.
Yes, but I'm here to learn something, you know?
That's right.
Did you guys see this one?
Yeah. Okay, the physics is not going to be
What?
4.23?
No, this is in, I think they said they're releasing it in, maybe it is 423.
I think it was 423 for that.
I guess if you don't need it in the morning.
It's going to be in 422, but it's not going to be.
Yeah, full, it'll be probably beta.
Of course, ray tracing isn't really finished either in 422.
Oh,
They do
none of
have
it's
it implemented.
finished.
Yeah.
They're always just like, okay, here's a tech demo, get your whistle wet for it, and then maybe in 20 years you'll see it in production.
It was kind of like the layered materials workflow was great because it was in 4.17 and then they killed it in 4.19. Yeah, this was sweet looking. See this one too. Oh yeah, this is
I
again.
have a class, sociology class. All my friends do good things because I started. Alright, so, assuming three blocks. Training, professional service, and to reinforce acts as shown on 3 kilogram block. Determine the acceleration given this system. Okay, so we know this.
It's too bad you can't really focus on making a game very well in this engine sometimes.
What do you mean?
I'm hearing a lot of people are rather whiny about Kingdom Hearts.
What's that?
The game, they focused so much on making it look right that it's
Oh, that they botched some of the game.
yeah,
mechanics.
the gameplay is kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's something I'll tell you day and night, that a game is really about the core mechanics. It's more
Yeah.
independent of or agnostic of the visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that a lot of people misunderstand about game making.
Yeah.
Attention and the
Well, you got people too that throw a lot of pretty visuals at it, but
Yeah, and it plays
is a
Yeah.
yeah, if it doesn't play.
It's not fun.
It's like Minecraft. You can play with cubes.
Yeah. It's gotta be fun first.
If I bought something, you can just type that and then we can correct it.
the mass
Cool. I will say one thing that's very, very encouraging right now in talks and GDC stuff that they said, Epic's really making some really good pushes in the right direction with the engine to make life a little bit easier on. I mean, granted, it's not gonna make your story any better, but the tech behind it's gonna be,
Yeah.
it's very, very nice.
It needs to be all about making the job easier, not necessarily just making it pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Rapid prototyping is a really
Can you hear audio all right coming through the Twitch stream just to make sure?
Yeah, I saw
I
the
guess we could always just ask.
control loop.
Hey Chad, how's the streams down?
You had, you got your animation. They had one of their paragons where
What?
and then they put a metal glove on it, threw it off.
Yep. Yeah, it's delayed.
Use the finger to control the glove.
Can you hear both vocals? I guess just to make sure that their mic's working too. If I talk now, can you hear me all right? Okay, but can you hear me all right too when I talk through this? Okay, all right, perfect. That was an interesting project for the. This one was really cool. Have you guys ever used HLODs?
Mm-hmm.
So an HLOD is like an LOD, but what you can do is you can clump groups of things together. So say for example you had 150 different assets like trash cans, trees, house parts, and all that one, but at a certain distance it would group those together as one mesh. Automatically generate a texture for them all together, so then you're getting one draw call for the mesh, one draw call for the material.
Instead of distance, they're going to do that.
Yeah, what you think about open worlds where you have a lot of clutter, HLODs are amazing. And now, they've had it in there for a while, but now this is the first time that they're talking about automatic generation.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised it took this long to get that to happen.
The automatic?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do it before, like you just manually select things and just click HLOD and it would do it, but now that it's a little bit more automated. This was a really interesting one. Yeah, they have the code line in there right now. I don't know if you have to have an individual SDK for it, but we came across it in 421 that they don't call it Magic Leap, they call it something else, but we're like, oh, that was interesting. We looked it up and like, oh, cool. So the code base is in there. The animation system's getting some really cool overhauls. particularly with automation where you don't have to. Oh, this was cool too. Live coding. So as you code, you don't have to compile. You can actually be running a simulation and running the whole time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I still need it.
And Preview 7 just came out today.
What?
I have to wait. Maybe Thursday for their Unreal Tech Speak.
Well, I've got a long cable. We could see if that works. Okay. Sweet. We'll get started since it's only you guys. It looks like we do have some people online too. So.
You joining us?
Oh, no.
Cool.
Why don't you come on over and get close to the mic?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We'll get started then.
We got a whole lot of stickers.
I know. More stickers if you wanted it. It's not working. You may have to. Nope. You have to switch over here. We'll play jump rope.
You know, you could take this table and just
Shift it over.
shift it over there. It's not like we need a lot of tables.
Let's see. We'll try that. Hopefully it doesn't turn. Oh, that's perfect. Hey, they adjusted the light, so it's just the projector right now.
That's nice, yeah.
So normally it would black out half the room.
Want to take this table?
Okay. Cool. All right. So this is part 2 of, I want to say this is a 5-part series. So broken up today, we're going to go into 2 parts. First part is actually just kind of the general level setup. I'm not going to go too deep on how everything is configured, but it's really just, it's going to be more just about how to set the environment, how to set some lighting things, just to make life a little bit easier for you. And then we'll break, and then when we get back, we'll actually go over, which I think is probably, because you guys are mostly programmers, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go over that. Now I will preface and give myself an out that I am not a programmer. So I actually did put this together. So this was my work. I guess that's maybe any consolation that that's a great way to just show that anybody can do it. Because if I did it, you here for the Unreal Meetup?
Sorry?
Here for the Unreal Meetup?
I am.
Cool. It's next. I'm just kidding. It's right here. You can sit down.
Well, the symbols are a little bit of a giveaway. Want to
Yeah.
take this one?
Go for it.
But yeah, so the second part we'll cover that. But like I said, I did all the setup, but I'll walk through. And then we actually have Conference in with us too. He's actually out eating dinner right now. But Skylar is one of the programmers at our studio. And so I've got him here as well. So he can hear you guys. You'll be able to hear him through the speakers. But if there's definitely some harder core, programming questions, he's here to kind of help save me because I don't want to botch it. So we'll do that. I had I actually did have a challenge question today. So to kick things off, this one I figured will take about 10 minutes or so. Let me.
4 people? Wow.
I know. Well, yeah, I know. So this is an interesting one. So I'll bring this over. Have you guys heard of Rape Day? No.
Yes, actually I did.
Okay.
Epic blasting Steam for having it on there.
No. So, okay. So this, like I said, this is very controversial, but we'll go here. So Rape Day was actually literally exactly what it sounds like. It was a game that you play a rapist and you rape people. Now,
Well, it was a game itself. It wasn't like we declared a holiday or something.
No, it's an actual game. And, and the thing was is that it was slated to be released on Steam because Steam changed their rules that they would be basically uncensored. And so they put it up there, and about 2 days, I think, before it was supposed to be released, Steam shut it down. So the question that I have here is, do you agree or disagree that by Steam saying they were completely open source, shutting it down, do you think that that was a good move for the game industry? And has censorship gone too far, or is it too lax?
Well, golly, Why don't you just start off with an easy one?
I know.
Well, this is the games as art question, after all.
Right.
But even when you apply art standards, that doesn't happen.
No.
So,
I never really found the argument that it's art is a good excuse for something.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't see this in games or you don't see this in art to begin with. Therefore, it makes sense that you wouldn't see this in games as art either.
Yeah.
And that's the only.
Now the developer made a pitch that he likened it. Again, this is way controversial. I should have probably put a thing on the stream to say this should be like mature discussions now.
Sure, audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
But the developers had made an argument that it's kind of like similar to like what porn is. People want an outlet or violent video games. This was just an outlet in a fantastical world, a fantasy world.
Yeah, that's a common.
The issue that you're asking is Steam the right platform for this? It's not that they shouldn't make games like
Right.
this. You know, we had FCC standards, family values, network television. If you wanted the nudity, you pay for HBO.
Yeah.
You know, or now you get whatever you want off the internet. It's not in public view.
Right.
So, you know, we have the dark web. You know, the internet used to be anything goes. Everybody's on there. We, you know, make it safe for kids, you know.
Right.
to
Well,
a
that was
degree.
actually Germany banned it, I believe, and shut down the website, banned it from actually being searchable.
Yeah.
You know, the theaters want to show X-rated movies. It was a different place where you go.
Right.
So, Steam,
So do you-
Steam After Dark or Steam,
Yeah.
you know, a separate area that not everybody's going to see without.
So do you think with that one, like movie theater showing X-rated, do you think this falls in the same category, or do you think this is in a whole nother league of its own?
I was gonna save this till afterwards, but before I talk to someone about Rape Day, could I just introduce some names, perhaps? It just seemed like a better start.
Yeah.
I was gonna sit here quietly and wait till the end, honestly, but
Yeah.
It usually isn't this
Yeah.
intense.
I know.
No,
No, no, I
jumped right into
Usually
that.
we try to do this one was just unique because this actually happened, I think, in the past week. But no,
Just
I'm-
last week. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why I was bringing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Josiah.
Yeah.
I apologize. I was hoping to just meet some other game developers around here, but
Cool.
There are other game developers around here? Really?
Apparently.
Wow. As soon as I see one, I'll let you know.
I know this is all of us, you know.
oh, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, he's the developer.
Yeah,
We're
so
just here for-
I'm Ryan Manning. I'm studio head of Bad Rhino Games. I'm also the Meetup lead, so this is an official Epic kind of sponsored Meetup, so we fall under there.
I think I talked to you on the phone.
Is there a way to turn their mic?
I think so. I can check it.
You don't want to hear me anyway.
Have you been here from the beginning? It's been about a year. I
Yeah.
was here from, you know.
Yeah, I've largely been here from the beginning.
I missed the first one. Everyone since then.
Like he asked, you know, I'm not an artist. I'm a programmer, game designer, independent. You know, it's not my real job. So yeah, I've just been coming here to learn about the business of games and game engines because they're kind of new to me. Because they used to be very expensive, and or they didn't exist, you know, 15 years ago.
Don't I know it?
Cool. Welcome, gents.
Hi, guys. Welcome back. For completeness, I'm Dennis. I've been a game dev for 2+ decades. That makes me feel old. And I've been in various states of game dev for a very long time. So I am learning a new engine here. I'm an Unreal kid. No, I'm a Unity kid. I am learning Unreal.
I am glad. Look at that. We're turning you already.
I see potential. I'm one of those right tool for the right job kind of people, and I'm seeing things that Unreal's capable of that Unity simply can't do or can't do easily. So I am learning.
Cool. Very cool.
I'm mainly a software developer, but I have an interest in games. It's just hasn't been my profession because you know there aren't any game developers in Kansas City, really.
Beg your pardon.
Yeah, well, no big
Not enough.
No big
Not enough.
Not enough.
Independent
Not
developers.
Yep.
We are not well known for game dev. That is for sure.
Barbecue and game dev. No, we're not.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah. So anyway, so we don't have to debate that anymore, but we'll get started. So just as a recap, so this is what we're on today is kind of part 2. So we'll do the actual kind of level setup, and like I said, towards the second half we'll actually do the road bike setup. And then you guys can kind of see throughout what we have scheduled next. Cool. Okay, you guys ready to get to it? Okay. Like I said too, you guys missed this, so you guys know me well enough to know that I'm an artist by trade, I'm not a programmer. So take heed, take hope. If you have any ounce of programming in you, you can probably do this better than I can. So with that, yeah, we...
Which actually brings us to the fact that this is one of the things that this app shines at, this tool shines at, making it accessible to non-coders.
Yeah. Now, I will say from kind of the way that this is set up, obviously I'm going to show you the Blueprint route, which is Unreal's native language. It works in this situation. Something you guys will probably know, C++ is way more optimized in terms of performance, but in this situation, because of the way this is set up and it's very lightweight, Blueprints works totally fine. So, cool. And I will say too that if you guys have any programming questions while we're kind of going through this, again, the second half is going to be more programming centric. Feel free to ask. If I don't know it, again, Skylar, one of our programmers on our team, is listening in, so he'll be able to answer, and we can get that, and then we'll have kind of a live QA.
You mentioned C++ being optimized, and C# an option as well as...
no, I believe C# is only in Unity.
Okay.
Unreal uses native C++.
So the blueprints, do those get compiled?
They can.
Or do they get interpreted at runtime?
Both. There is the ability to convert your C++ or your blueprints to C++ code in runtime, but it's not as...
It's not a one-to-one, and then you end up going back, trying to go back for the artists, and then you're like, it doesn't quite work.
Well, it's like
right.
Java, just-in-time compiling, it's like you need more optimized and interpreting at runtime. There's a lot of it.
You had a question, didn't you? I forgot, on the Unreal Discord, which, by the way, you guys know Discord. We've actually got a few more people, which is awesome. Feel free to ask questions there.
I definitely want to speak with that, but let's do that in the second half because it's much more of a programmer-type question, and I have more to ask about it.
Okay, cool, because I do have an answer for you, so confirmed.
Because I've got, yeah.
Okay, so like I said, the first half, this is really just a level setup. So this is the beauty part of going through this. So with the bike that we had seen, obviously this was just to throw the components in, but I want to cover kind of the rest of the environment. So if I go full screen here, you can kind of see. Yeah, let me hide those real quick so you guys. That's a lot of. That's one thing too. If you have an asset and you in the actual description, there's the ability to, for example, I'll go here. There's a hide in game, and so when you press G for game mode, that's what you actually see. And so with all of these in here, that's camera setups and yeah, a lot of stuff. So let me see. We'll go through. There we go. Cams. This guy.
That rendering error.
Okay, I'll hide those. Okay, so yeah, so you can see I was playing around with some different ideas here that never made it to the final. So to start with, the process that I used with this one in particular was going through. There we go. And I simply just created cubes. These are just in-engine cubes. There's nothing fancy to them, so just going over here, adding a cube, throw it in, and squash and scale it. And that works perfect. So that was set up to establish kind of the general shell of it. And now below, there's another cube, and then I'll apply material, which I'll show you how that material was. The cool part about this, hey, welcome, sir. The cool part about this is there's nothing really fancy here. There's no real major artistry behind this particular setup. Okay. The material actually, let me open this one for you so you guys can see. I know we've covered it in the past. This was actually just downloaded from Substance Source. I know I showed you guys last night. I just found a tile material, went in there, made a couple adjustments, and then exported out the 3 maps. Now, I did set up, and we've covered master materials before, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is one just I stole. it looks like a lot of nodes, but basically the important things, we have a base color, we've got an ambient occlusion, roughness, metalness, which is a single map, and then of course our normal map. That's really all that matters in this situation. So from my substance export, that's where I plugged in my base color, my occlusion, roughness, metalness map, and then my normal map. And then I just tile it up a little bit. So that is literally it for the floor. So that's how I was able to get kind of this surface. Now I'll go into the reflections here in a second. Oh, is it too loud? Yep. Cool, there we go. Sorry, we're trying to balance the microphone. So. Actually,
there's a lot of background noise going on today.
Yeah. Would you guys shut up? Just kidding. So the next one here is just a stretch cylinder, and all I've done on this guy is simply just applied an emissive. This is actually a really simple material. All of 3 nodes. So I simply just took a color coming in, exposed a parameter for intensity, and then multiplied it to make our emissive color. And so in the instance that I made, I just changed the color to pure white and then just bumped the intensity up. So this guy gives us kind of this kind of faux illumination. Now the thing to know on this one is that that light itself is not actually casting any lighting. So 422, 423 coming out where we have ray tracing, that's not in this. So this is all just static. But I do have in my bake settings, which I think we covered a couple meetups ago, I do have cast static lighting, actually the emissive casting when you do your static lighting. So it does contribute just a little bit. So yeah, so there's just 4 cylinders kind of placed around here just to give a little breakup. That same material was applied to our ceiling, so we've got kind of little corner lights. Again, this is all just theming. You know, we could go in here, we could add like maybe some like faux wood panels or things like that. It's entirely up to you guys. I think the key here, takeaway with the material setup is just keeping something simple. Like I said, if you guys go on to like Substance Source, they got plenty of them, and just slap them on there, and you can get some really good results. Okay, so that's kind of what I'll consider the set dressing. Now, if I showed this is a technique that I might cover a little bit later, not tonight in the meetup, but maybe in the future. And that is inside the engine. You guys don't have it by default, but if you do view options and you do have show engine content, you're going to get this folder down here, which is engine content. If you click the root and then SM_C, you'll get this SM color calibrator. And what that is that's an actual RGB checker pattern that's calibrated. In addition to that, you get kind of these four spheres. There's a 50% gray. Now this is linear space, but that is true 50% gray ball. You've got a chrome ball for your reflections, and the 2 in the back are a 50% gray and a pure black car paint. So that actually has some of the translucency and stuff like that. So whenever I go in to light my scenes, this is the process that I'll typically use. I'll throw a couple of these guys in there just to make sure my lights are semi-decent. So does that make sense, that guy? And the same thing like I said before too, if you click it and inside the settings, there's an actor hidden in game. So if I uncheck this and I go, you can see the reflection is active there. Now it's not, but if I go back into game mode, this would actually bake out at real time. So
you have a consistent, as you do more projects, you will always have that reference point and know what it's supposed to look like.
Correct. And I find that to be the easiest way to find out if your light is too bright or it's too dark, because otherwise you may bump up a light really, really bright, combat it with other stuff, and go back and forth. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the next point, which is our post-processing volume. Now, like I said, I think I've covered this before in one of our lighting ones. So I won't go too deep in here, but you'll notice all the little yellow hook arrows. Those are just means I made setting changes. Really for this one, all I've really done is just removed everything. So removed the bloom with the camera. I've reset one of the compensators. Under exposure, this is where I changed min and max brightness to 1. So if I didn't have that changed, and say for example the camera was rotating and it managed to capture one of the bright lights in there, it would darken because it was trying to balance the lighting. So by me setting it to 1 and 1, it fixes it. So no matter if I'm looking in a dark spot or a light spot, that changes. But of course you guys could change that. But this is the best place to start by reducing those to 1 and 1, because then you can get your lighting balance and then go back and tweak it for your final look. And then same thing with lens flare, just took the intensity down so I don't get any of this stuff. So that guy's, I did reduce the vignette a little bit. That was just merely for when we actually, if I'll do a new editor window. That was simply just to give a little bit more cinematics to it. So it's probably hard to see on this projector, but there is a little bit of vignetting, again, just stylistic. But overall, the post-processing volume itself, again, I just reduced everything, took away a bunch of the extra fancy bits, and that's it. So asset placement in, I've got my reference targets just so I can kind of see you know, how my lighting's being built. I've got my my road bike in there. I've got all my basic pieces. Now the next part is to actually start lighting this to get what we want. So I'm going to jump through that real fast. So let me actually disable, and I'll show you guys kind of the process I did with this. And I may blow the lighting apart here, so hopefully, if not, I'll just reload it. So the first thing that I did is I started with, in fact, actually, let me, okay. Actually, I think they are set to dynamic. So I started with just kind of a directional light. And this is simply just acting as my fill in the scene. So it just lights everything from the top. Actually, you know what? I am going to kill the lighting so you guys can kind of see what's happening here. Okay, there we go. Maybe. Doesn't want to work right now. Okay, there we go. That's looking better. And then let me hide my sphere reflections. Okay, there we go. That's kind of back to what we were wanting. Actually, let me back up real quick. I think we covered this a little bit in the ArcViz one, but especially when you're using reflective surfaces in Unreal. Now, granted, this changes slightly with ray tracing when you have it in real time, but for the most part, you'll still want to use the same process, and that is just simply adding in your sphere reflection captures. So to do that, if you just go over, you can search. I think it's under, it's in here somewhere, but if you just do reflection, you'll get a box, planar, and spherical. Spherical is the cheapest, but by simply just dragging it in there, there's a couple settings that you'll want to take note of. Again, this is going to capture what's in our scene and reproject it. Is the influence radius. So as I bring this up, you can kind of see a little bit. It's getting out of control pretty quickly, but you notice that it starts affecting the floor. So if I take it down, you can see right there. So that's the actual influence radius, and then brightness of the scene. So you can pump more into this. So this is, it's pretty much mandatory with reflective surfaces. But the key here is just kind of put it at eye level where the person would be. And then the second thing here is this captured scene. Now you can choose a specific cube map. So for example, I had an HDRI. I could pump that in there and it would reflect that HDRI into the world. But in this situation, I do want to use captured scene. So just be aware that as you place these, you may need one, you may need two. It will recapture the scene when you build. So if you're building lighting, it will take into account. The spherical reflection captures as well are what's helping to shed, like for example right here, the light bouncing off of this. Now I could go in and disable them, but that's, this is what's, in fact actually let me take them down to 0 and that may help. There we go. Okay, so you can see with this this other one being captured, if I bump this up, yeah, let's of course, it's not behaving on me right now. But just know that that's actually what you're seeing in the reflections themselves is the information being projected from the reflection captures. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's being stupid. It's not cooperating with me. Okay, so those are in there. We'll kind of go back through the lighting. There we go. Okay, so yeah, so the thing I started with first is just by adding my directional light. Fun little trick here, 3.14. I've covered this before, it's an interesting little number, but by setting your light to 3.14, that is a neutrally lit light. So if you imagine like a 20 watt bulb or a 1,000 watt bulb, it's the one that's like a 60 to 100 watt bulb. So that's really the best place to start. So I added my directional light, which kind of helped fill, and I'll show you here too. Another thing is that I approached lighting this from the perspective that I knew the camera would start, which was this, because you know when it starts up, you see it, and I wanted something that looked kind of automotive-y. So that was the first light. The next lights that I added were these kind of corner lights. Now these were set, I switched them to movable because I was trying to kill the lighting, but it didn't work. But these were set as, I believe, stationary. Is how I had them set up in the original project. And with these, okay, I don't have an IES profile. They're simply there to just cast additional light into the scene to help fill out the other spaces and then also project into our reflection capture that information. So those guys are added there. Let me see if I can show you one of them. So all I've done there is the inner cone is set to 17 degrees, which kind of gives me the nice little spot on the floor, but the outer cone has been set to 180 degrees. So that ensures that when it calculates the lighting, it kind of fills that corner, helps to break up all the blackness that's in there. Another thing too that I'll show you guys here is if I take I'll add another spotlight real quick. Something you may run into, let me project this on the wall so it's easier to see. Something you may run into is you may find that your light, it fades off too quickly. So there's a couple ways you can do that. I mean, you could obviously bump up the intensity, which may or may not give you what you want. You can do the attenuation radius, so how far that cone affects it. But another little trick here is if you expand that roll-up that's at the bottom of just the basic light settings, there's the ability to turn, use inverse square fall off. So with this, I'm just going to be projected on the bike so it's easier to see. Mathematically, it's just allowing that light, instead of rolling off very quickly, it's more of like a linear curve, so you get a lot more intensity for a lot further. But of course with that, your intensity needs to be bumped down considerably. But that is another way. And then by adjusting your exponent, it will push that light further. So, little trick with spotlights. Okay, and then the next lights that I added were kind of these overhead fills. Now these I believe were set to, yeah, these were all set to static as well. So everything in our ceiling was set to static. So there was no dynamic lighting at runtime. I believe the only one, and I'll reload the project if we need to, I believe the only one that was set to actual dynamic, movable, was this overhead light. That was simply because we knew we were doing an animation, so we wanted to make sure we had, you know, shadows and things actually, you know, projecting in real time. So that's the only light that was set. Another thing to note that I've done here as well is with stationary and movable lights, in particular movable lights, you can only have a maximum of 4 overlapping lights. Otherwise you run into a problem with the calculations. And what you'll get is that little red X over the light, which means that he's probably not going to be calculated in those in those render calculations. So like I said, for all of the with all of our overhead lights, they were set to static because I just wanted it to make lighting in the world, and that was it. So yeah, and then really the process for, oh yeah, question?
We have a missive going on those lights in the ceiling.
Yes.
Why do we also need specific lights created there?
Yeah, so that was actually kind of what I was going to segue into the next one.
Sorry.
No, you're totally good. So the process that I do with my lighting is I add a light, I bake the lighting, just see how it goes. And then I added the rest of the top lights, set their intensities relatively close to I want it, and I baked the lighting. And I tweaked that, and I got it to a point where, you know, it looked good. And you just kind of go through that iterative process of make some tweaks, build it, cool, it looks good, all good and go. With your emissive one though, you can set to have your emissive cast light into the scene, kind of what you're saying. However, it's not acting like a true physical light. It will cast some light, but like say for example, you took that emissive and it was at 10, kind of where it's at now, where it visually looks nice, it's not adding a ton of bloom, and you baked your lighting, and then say you ramp that up to like 1,000, so it's really blown out, it's not going to cast more light, it's not going to have more energy in that bake. So that's why, you look confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because it's kind of, it's pseudo lighting, but there's not really, whereas with spotlights, point lights, area lights, they have an energy intensity parameter with them that says how far it will go, how far it will cast.
So right now, when we're looking at the emissive of those lights, we're really just talking about the emissive of drawing that cube of the light.
Correct.
And then the bloom is what's making it filter outward from that.
Right, yeah, so if
not
I...
the same thing as actually casting light to other objects from that bloom.
Correct. Yeah, so like if I take this and crank it way up.
But that's only affecting the HDR. That's not actually affecting the bike on the floor.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, this is simply just making it look like, so if I turn them off, it's simply just, it's like a faux light. It looks like a light panel. Now, granted, one of the advantages here is that it will be processed into that reflection capture. So that's why on the wall here, we can see the reflection of the lights, because it's the emissive actually still calculated.
What you're only really seeing is the emissive, because I know that you don't really see much of the spotlights in that reflection.
Correct. Yep, and the big reason for the spotlights is because I got that really narrow cone. I just wanted them as decorative, like a 4-inch can light. And that was simply just to fill in the corners, the dark corners. So, cool. So that covers getting just our geometry in there, our test cubes, just to make sure we know what we're doing, blocking everything out, adding the lights, adding our post-processing volume, and then simply just baking it to where it looks good. And that's it. And after that point, I just kind of let it be. Any questions on that stuff so far? Does that all make sense? Cool, okay. Cool, like I said, I know we've covered a bunch of these things before, so I didn't want to rehash too much of this, but that is the general setup of the scene. There's really, like I said, nothing complex. I will say in a situation where, this is probably blown out, but in a situation like this where you're doing a product, kind of shot, it does worth mentioning, spend a little time, make it look pretty, but don't feel like you have to be an expert in authoring materials. Go to Substance Source, go to Quixel, grab some, throw them in as a simple material, and that's it. Okay, let's see, what time is it? 6:30. We're a little ahead. Anything you guys want me to cover on the level design before we move on to programming stuff? Nope. Cool, okay. Let's do this then. Let's take a little 5-minute break real quick. That'll allow me to get my stuff set up, and then we'll jump right in, and I'll double check to make sure too that Skylar's around, so if you guys have programming questions, he can answer those too, and we'll start going through that. So, cool? Awesome.
Remote workers.
Or what?
Remote workers.
Yep. Yeah, everything was set up at our studio to do that. So I've got a fiber connection coming to the house. So we run our Perforce server there. I use dynamic DNS, so it will always ping out exactly what it is, and they connect via that DNS, and they can pull files, push files. We've also got a VPN set up as well, so in the event that they need to get on some of the local dev stuff, even some of the console kits, they can do that as well. Works pretty smoothly.
Remote dev, way of the future, if you can do it. Not everybody's capable of doing remote dev well.
I will say that there's two keys that we've kind of discovered, I think, the hard way. The first one is personal responsibility. You got to have developers that understand it, and I think also that have appropriate office space for it, i.e., not a spouse or somebody doing something right beside them, or having constant distractions or TV and stuff. That's been a huge one. And the second one is we found at least a daily face-to-face, which we do our dailies. We use Zoom, which is actually what Skylar's connected now. In fact, actually, we just leave that up all day. So it's kind of like a virtual conference room. If people are on, they just join. That makes a huge difference, because then you don't feel like you're just working by yourself.
Yep. Communication is very key. People who can't communicate their ideas well, you really end up walking away thinking, what just happened? But yeah, you really need to have people who know how to communicate their thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you too. I actually do enjoy the remote work. I think it's a lot of fun. If nothing more than sweatpants and no shoes, it works awesome.
I'm sorry, you enjoy the what more?
Remote work. We were talking about.
Oh, remote work.
Yeah.
Some people can make it work.
Yep. Yeah, you missed. That's what we're talking about.
And the space, dedication.
Yeah.
This one.
Or, yeah, this.
Cool. Okay. You guys ready to get started again? It's a chill day. I feel like we should be outside with beers. Yeah.
You know, this actually might be a perfect day for us to just chat about how to make this stuff work over, outside at a barbecue.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Barbecue.
Okay, cool. So like I said before too, I'm going to give myself the scapegoat. I'm not a programmer by training. So, but again, I did actually put all this stuff together, so I did the work. But if I skip over things, call me out on it, and I'll do my best. Like I said, Skylar's here too, so he'll answer some questions as well. But we'll get started. So again, the second part is really showcasing the whole setup for the blueprint. And what I mean by blueprint is if I relaunch it again, on the bike itself, last month's meetup, we actually covered creating all the different variations, all the different textures. So with that, oops, that's camera, my bad. We'll go back, we'll reset. I think it was, 5. So the blueprint is what's going to allow us to, when we click on the HUD, it's what's going to allow us to switch all these different variations. So it's the logic behind that. It's also the logic that, now granted for this one, I originally approached this project with the idea that I would have, say, 3 or 4 of these in the same level. So I didn't want to set up an individual blueprint for each one. I wanted a master one that went into the actual level itself and said, hey, find any instance of this blueprint and just control it that way. So you'll see some things that are kind of set up in that fashion. And then additionally, about halfway through production of this particular project, we decided to switch over and have the ability to do this animation. So if I go back in here and I click kind of our little guy on the bike here, it animates. So with that, there was a second approach that we took. Now I kept the code in there so you guys can see how I did it. But we took a second approach because in order to make this work, we had to have an actual skeletal animation with it. Because we needed to have the chain driving, and there was really no other way to do it. So with that, I will show you the code that's in there. It's just slightly different, but the principle is the exact same of how we target the individual components for that. Okay, so in our level setup, there's a couple things that we wanted to do just from an ease standpoint. And the first thing is actually the player controller. So by simply just right-clicking, and you can do blueprint class, you can do player controller here. And that's what we set up on this guy, which is our player controller configurator. And I'll actually open it in the full blueprint so you can see. And really all we changed here, because we knew with this project we wanted to target it on a touchscreen device, we needed to make sure we can enable the input of touch as well as being able to see the mouse, because by default in game, the mouse cursor is hidden. So by creating this player controller, this is where we target here. So show mouse cursor, enable click events, enable touch events, mouse over, and enable touch over events as well. So I simply just click those. That's it. That's all this controller does. The next thing that we did was our game mode configurator. Now by default, each map has its own game mode, but in this situation, we wanted to create one. So again, if I were to say I create another level or something, I wouldn't have to recreate this code from scratch. I could just retarget this game mode. Does that make sense? So it just makes the life a little bit easier, but nothing super fancy. Really, all that's been added to this, and this was at the very end, but I'll just, the code's there, so I'll show you. This little blueprint here is just simply attaching this widget configurator, which I'll show you what that is. I can click the little icon here and show it, but that is just simply the HUD. That's all it is. I won't go through this. I think this is slated for a little bit later. But just know that in this game mode, when I assign it to the actual game mode in the level, it's what's going to allow me that when I begin my play, it's going to find the player controller, attach this widget configurator, and then just add it to the viewport. So now I have my HUD. Again, you could set this up by default in the game mode, but in the situation of what we wanted to make sure we had that. So again, if we created a new level, say, say this product configurator, again, we've got a fake client here. Let's say a client comes back and says, hey, this is really cool, I like your environment, but I want to change it. I want you to add 4 bikes, 1 in the center, a couple on the wall, and I want you to do this kind of outdoorsy thing. Cool, no problem. By having all this stuff set up, our player controller, our game mode as well, I can just simply create a new level and assign those there. And to do that, you just go under World Settings, which if you don't have it by default, just Window, World Settings. And in their Game Mode Override, I just supplied my Game Mode Configurator, and then in my Player Controller class, that's where I assign my PC Configurator. And that's it. Really, the only setting that we changed in here, which will come a little bit later, is our Player Cam, and I'll show you the code for that, but that was something that just allows us to be able to do the touch and move around. So, does that make sense on that stuff? So very, very basic stuff, but again, that makes life a little bit easier than if you ever had to expand out any of those kind of functionality or controls. Again, it's on the widget, not on the level, so just kind of a nice way of making that work. Cool, okay. So let's go on to the blueprint itself. Yes? Oh, I'm echoing. Let me do this. Maybe I'll mute that. First world stream problems. Okay, cool. Maybe I'll do like ASMR. I'll just put my mouth open and how would you do I won't do that, it would just be weird. Okay, so for the actual road bike blueprint itself, so the way that I've organized this is in our road bike, if you remember from last month, we have all of our materials, we have our individual meshes, so these are all of our individual components, and then we have all of our textures, and again, this was how we had set it up in Substance, that when we exported, we wanted to make sure that we had the name for each one. So that's where we'll be targeting some of this stuff, but just know that everything we're throwing is in this road bike folder. And the reason for that is if we ever needed to migrate this project or we wanted to take this road bike configurator and give it to somebody else, I can package that folder up and I know they have everything they need. So just a little optimization tip. Okay, so in the blueprint, I believe this was just simply right-clicking blueprint class and adding an actor. Now I won't profess, I'll be honest, I don't know exactly all of the classes. You guys probably know better. But one thing to note is that you do have these default kind of ones that pop up. However, there is an all classes that you can target way more than this. And that's simply, you can start typing, find something that's in there. But there's a lot that's available to you. But for this one, we just simply did an actor, which is an actor is an object can be placed or spawned in the world. So we did that. So I'll open this guy up and then we'll start breaking this down a little bit. Let me see actually here. Oh, actually I'm going to back up. Okay, so to explain a little bit what's happening here, let me see if I cover this. Which mic? Okay. Okay. Let me see. Oh, actually, no, that's muted. We'll see if that's better. I'll come back to it, but there's two blueprints that we have here. This one I'll cover in a second, but one is our logic that we'll place in the world. And this is kind of going to be our brains of the operation. So what's going to happen with this is we place it in the world, and it's what's going to cast in the world and say, hey, where are all my instances of this blueprint? And I'm going to control all the logic. So that's what I was saying. This is rather than us actually setting up individual blueprints and trying to control each and every individual one, the logic is what does that. So we'll come back to that in a second. But for now, let me show you the first setup that we had. If you recall, I mentioned that about halfway through the production of this one, we switched to using an animated object, which is a skeletal mesh, as opposed to an individual one. But all I did for this is simply created a new actor. I'll just call this test. Open them up, and then in the viewport, this is where I went in and just grabbed all of my meshes and threw them in there. And that's it. So the blueprint has this default root, and it has all of our individual components already set up in there. So I could come in now, if we go back to our blueprint, our test here, and simply throw that in there, and now I have that blueprint in the level. Now on the details over here, you can see we still have all of our individual components that we can target. So that's a basic blueprint. More akin to a prefab right now than it is. But the cool part about these blueprints is that we can actually put some logic behind it. Let me go ahead and delete this guy. There we go. Move back. So this first one, if I go back to my viewport, this is where we have all of our individual components that are in there. Now, let me see if I put this under. Yeah, so this was all of the. There it is. So I originally had set out on this setup where I created a new variable, and I just called that, whatever component it was that I wanted, and then set it as an output so I could target this. And with that, I simply just grabbed, if I drag this in there, you can see I can grab that component from the blueprint. This was the original setup, but then I got smart and I did it all in one. So with this, I simply just created this new variable called getRoadBikeComponents by adding just a new function in there. And then with that, I was able to, on my outputs, I was able to set new parameters. Now there is a way, if I remember correctly how to do this, you can drag it in. No, never mind, scratch that. I'll cast more confusion. But really what this setup here is doing in our blueprint is simply allowing me to expose those mesh components over here. So I can then target those and change those, because as you'll see in the logic blueprint, that's what we're targeting. That's all the mode we're changing. So when I click one of those buttons that say, hey, this is the configuration I want, you'll see that really that logic just says, hey, find all these components and change this component's material to this. And that's it. So when it clicks, boom, it changes all those. So in order to do that on our blueprint, we have to know what we're targeting. So that's what this setup was. So again, just by creating a new function, which we called getRoadBikeComponents, and then setting our outputs to all the different components that we want, which associate with this. So if we look at for example, our road bike frame, right there, and then we just simply output it and called it frame mesh. Cool, pretty simple.
And this is all on the actor, correct?
Yes, this is all still happening on our blueprint itself. Just the bike itself. Now this is just simply just the assembly of the bike, not the logic behind it.
Right.
Now I'll show you guys this one too, because this was the animated one. Very similar, but you can see from our skeletal mesh, that's the frame. And then we've got these wheels, because this is what we had to target in our animation to be able to do everything. And then of course, with it, we've added an animation curve. This is simply just the rotation. So it kind of looks like it's slowly spinning up and then it goes to full speed. It's still kind of the same process. Now I'll come back to this. On the static mesh one, so the first thing that we looked at, we had the individual components that we could target, and we could target their materials through that. However, with a static mesh, it's slightly different. With that, we now have element IDs for each of these. So you can see we still have, our cassettes, our chain, our frame, our bottle, derailleur, all of the individual components. But instead of targeting the mesh and the material, we're now going to target this element ID. So you'll see that a little bit later, but just know that that's really fundamentally the only difference between our animated version of the blueprint and our static version of the blueprint. Okay, and I think that is literally it. Like I said, all of these other tabs were just the individual components, but then again, I got smart and just did that. So that's just the blueprint. And I could drag this in. Which is this guy here. I can just drag it in. You can see that it's all kind of pre-compiled and stuff. Now, something that's kind of cool about blueprints, but obviously we're not doing here, you can still individually control the components and the variables inside of a blueprint, inside of it. So this isn't like an instance, so if I change one, it changes all of them. Now, if I change the root blueprint, it will, but in the level, I could go into here, say like the brakes, and I could go in and I could change it to this. That's actually probably, let me see if I can find the frame. A bit easier to see. I'll change it to the hot green. So I can still have my individual components in there and change the blueprint. Cool. So does that make sense on just a base blueprint setup for the actor? Okay, cool. All right, on to our road bike logic. And this is where things get a little fuzzy for me. The purpose of this road bike logic, again, was I didn't want to control through the level blueprint, which is one way to do it, where I could target all those actors. I could put the code on there, but then if I created a new level, right, I don't have my logic anymore. I've got to go in from the other level, copy it, paste it in there, and hopefully that I hooked all the nodes up correctly. So by creating this new, I think I just did a static actor on this one. Yeah, it's an actor. By doing this logic now, that is the brains of the operation. So it's interpreting my clicks, it's interpreting the movement of things, it's where I set all my variations. Because it's all on there, again, if I created a new level, I could simply just drop in, oh, we're doing animated or static? Static. Okay, cool, here's the blueprint that has it set up, and here's my logic. And that's it, that's all I do, and everything is controlled through there. So again, kind of a nice way to hack it. Is it overkill for this situation? Maybe. You guys hedge your bets on that one. But again, I approach this from, again, like a fake client, assuming that they want multiple variations. They want different settings and stuff. So this approach to me made more sense. Okay, so we'll kind of dissect a little bit this road bike logic. I guess I should back up. Really the process for this, to enable it in the level, drag it and drop it. There we go. Now it's enabled. Okay, let's see, let's go over, I think what I want to do first is the initialize road bike logic. So if I open this guy, okay, the way that this works is, if you remember that we created the components list where we plugged everything out, we created a variable on our blueprint. This is the output of this. Now, for this one, because I don't have the static mesh variation because I knew about halfway we were going to animate. But that is what this is. So this is getting a list of all those components and then simply giving me a list of those things. So again, this allows me from this logic to say, okay, hey, I know that there's a list in here. Let me just grab everything that's from you and I will store that as these are all the components I can cover. So that's what this first thing does. What's really cool about this setup is, if you remember what I had said before, I'm not targeting the individual blueprint. I'm targeting the actor, the class of that blueprint. So by doing this setup, I could have one, I could have 100 of my bike. It doesn't matter. What this is doing is saying, hey, I'm just scanning the entire level here, and if there's anybody of this class, Cool. Hey, I got all your components. Just be aware I might be telling you something here in the future. So that's what this setup does here on the initializer. Yeah, we didn't use that one, so I'll close him. Okay. Let's see. Any questions so far on that? Cool. Okay. All right, so now comes the fun part. Let me get my variation 1 up here. Ooh, this does not scale well. Okay, so far we know up to this point we have our scene, we have our blueprint, we have our components, we have our material IDs. We now have the variable that says, hey, go ahead and scan the level, find all of these things. We're ready to actually target it and do something. So that's what this is. So I simply just created a new function, and you'll notice I've got right here, actually let me move this guy up. I've got variation 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I will tell you that I spent 90% of my time creating variation 1, duplicated it, created variation 2, duplicated it. They're all pretty much the same. So that's what we're going to kind of break through here. So this would have been my function. Now, what you'll notice here, I know it's hard to read the nodes, the very top one, that's our static mesh. The bottom one is our animated mesh. So you remember I told you about halfway through I just kept all the code. So this first sequence node, because you can only execute off of one pin, the sequence node just says, hey, do this first and you do this second. So all the code is there, but if I dropped in one of my static meshes, it would still give me all my variations. But just be aware that I'll come down here. Really all we're seeing in the final one is our animated one, because that's what's actually the level is our skeletal mesh. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, so again, top and bottom code are literally the same, but I'll show you the one variation. Okay. So with our variation 1, I come off to our sequence here. Now the first one is our static mesh bike. If you remember, we created that list, right? We said, hey, I want you to grab all these components and create a list for me. That's what this guy is, this road bike list. So it plugs in as an array, because again, it can have one variable, it can have 10, it can have 100. You guys know this more than I do. Yeah.
All right, so I know you have the initialized road bike.
Yes.
To get all your elements, the meshes.
Pretty sure you're jumping ahead.
I might be.
What's the question?
Where are you in calling that at?
You're jumping ahead. Let
Is
him
that
get
in
there.
the construction script?
Let him get there.
Okay.
He's not there yet.
All right.
He's just wiring up the bike. Then we'll get to what calls that.
So yeah, so I've got those list of components.
Right.
And what I'm doing now here is a for each loop, and that's just simply going in. I've got my loop body, so that's going to be my sequence, what it's going to roll through. And then I've got my array elements. So again, this is where it's pulling from this road bike list, which we had our initialized road bike, the road bike list, which comes from, if I'm not mistaken, on our actual blueprint. Let me see. Nope, that was the. Put it in road bike logic. I can't remember. It gets it somewhere. I'll put it that way. But yeah, so we then break out these array elements because we're going to need to target each one. If you remember, we have these material variations. Now, with it, not all of our individual components have the same number of materials, right? Like our derailleur has 2, a carbon fiber and a stainless steel. Now our bike frame has 5 of them. So that's why we're grabbing all these individual components. Sequence node here is just simply to allow us to have a little bit nicer graph, so we don't, because we can only pull one pin off. But this runs through, in this case, we have 10 total components that we're targeting to eventually change. Now with the sequence, if I drag one in here, that's by default. You can do add pin, you can right click on it, and you can remove execution pin. But then you can just set as many as you need. But in this case, again, we've got 10 of them.
Just so I'm clear, sequence, they are practically, for all reasonable purposes, immediate. Yes. They're not truly in parallel, but that makes sure that you know that thing 1's going to happen before thing 2.
Correct.
But it's still all going to happen within one frame.
Correct. Yeah, and it's because on this one, what we're actually doing with it is just setting material. It's pretty instantaneous. So I don't want to misquote that, but yeah, I haven't seen any lag, but I know that there is intelligence behind that. So yeah, you know, pin 0 will come before pin 1, and so on and so forth. But we do have to use that sequence to be able to be able to target, because otherwise we drag one and then drag off another, then drag off another. This just makes things a little bit nicer. So then really all we're doing here is just a set material. Now I believe if you just right click and it's set, no, I can't remember exactly which one, if I'm not, yeah, I can't remember 100%. But basically it's setting the material. So that's all we're doing is we're saying, hey, on this target, so in this case the frame mesh, I want you to set the material. And the material is, if we go back here to our view, right here, our frame. So it can be whatever material you want associated with it. But that is all that we're doing. So the sequence will run through, it'll look at the derailleur mesh, and I want you to set it to this material. The rear derailleur, pedals, it's all that. So that's really all the logic is here. So when variation 1 is clicked, our variable, it says go ahead and do this. That's it. Now if you remember, so on this one we're getting road bike components. Side note, I just read my notes. I think I found the answer to that, so I may have it for you. Our animated one, it's slightly different. So with this, we're still getting our list of components from that animation list, and we're still doing, we're still extracting that array stuff. However, this is a little bit wonky. Now, if you guys want the answer to why we had to set it up this way, I'm sure Skylar can answer that because he actually helped on this one. But inside of an animatable mesh, it's a little bit different trying to target a specific thing. So that's why we had to do this target, and then we had to call the back wheel, target a child actor of that, find the wheels, and so on and so forth. But the principle is the same, that we're just diving into that blueprint and saying, hey, I'm targeting you. And so with that, almost the exact same process. We come out of our sequence, we have our target, which, you know, in this case is, I think, so road bike frame is a little deceptive because it's not actually the frame. If I go back to my blueprint here, the animated one, that's what it was called, road bike frame. But for all intents and purposes, that is just simply the mesh minus the wheels. The key thing to note here is this, all of our material IDs. So if we go back to the blueprint, this is where we have the element index. So if we look at here, for example, so the road bike frame, which again is the skeletal mesh, comes out to the target. Element 2, which in this case element 2 is our frame, set elements 2 to frame underscore n. And so then we went to like a variation 3 and looked at this, we now have version 2 of the frame. Make sense? And that's it. And that's all that we're doing through is we're just cycling through all the components that we want to change. Excuse me. And that's it. And really all I did from this point on was just what I wanted to theme it. And that was simply just, you know, dragging something. In fact, I'll show you that process here. Yeah, all the mess is back. Let's hide our cameras. That's actually what these guys in the back are here. So you can see, I think I came up with like a total of like, what was that, 7, 8 variations, and I was like, yeah, I should probably stop, because I could keep going. But then I was able just to pick the variations that I liked, you know, select each bike, go in, and I can just select the individual components, find out what I assign to them, and then simply plug them into my blueprint. So. And again, this is all on the logic of the blueprint. So this is not on the actual the mesh or the animated mesh. This is just simply on that logic blueprint. Hence why we're having to target a list, create a list, get those variables, and then retarget back to those, hey, change these components. But again, the cool part about this is I can drop this in any level, and it's going to say, hey, I'm looking for road bike anim. Anybody here in the level have it? Yeah, I'm here. Cool. Hey, I got some instructions for you. Okay, let me see if because I think I've got this one.
Construction screen.
I do not. So hold on. Answer your. Let me actually see. This might be a good chance to go. Let me see if Skylar, you're there, right? We'll see if we can still hear you. Maybe. Cool. Okay, so did you hear the question that he had? Yay, nay?
No.
Okay. You want
The
to
initialize road bike wheels logic, I think is that the function that creates the road bike list?
let me go back to this real fast. You were saying that this was in the initialized road bike?
Yeah.
Okay.
How's that being called? Is that part of the construction script?
Okay, yeah. So in our initialize, we're setting this road bike list.
You could put it in a construction script. It's being called from the level blueprint in this example.
That's right.
Level blueprint.
So if I open up my level blueprint, I knew I forgot something.
Okay.
There we go.
There's
Okay.
the get all actors
Yes.
of class
Okay.
we were
Right.
talking about. Okay.
Right.
I knew I forgot some screenshots. Yeah, this was the other thing too. So I know that I had mentioned with the logic blueprint that we're throwing into the level, that was really kind of helped save us from putting a lot of code in the level blueprint. We're still going to need some code in there. In fact, actually, I can show you real fast. So we've got our same sequence here, which again is just to execute these things on our event begin play. And with that, really all this is add audio component. This is a sound cue, which I don't know. This may, hopefully this won't be too. See if you guys can hear this. Very, very subtle. That's just our background music. That's all that is. So we're just adding that audio component to the level when it plays. Here is that logic in answer to your question on the get all actors. So it's searching the level, and if you can remember that I kept both pieces of code in here. We've got one for our road bike BP, which is our static meshes, and the other is our anim BP, which is our animated mesh. So it's saying get all actors of class, which we have set there, and then set our road bike list, and then initialize this logic, which is being cast to that road bike logic. And then the rest here, all of this stuff looks like a lot. That's simply just setting our camera. This I think we'll cover a little bit later, but I mean I'll show you guys here now. This associates with when we play, when we select our camera. All it's doing is it's interpolating the position that we had set here.
And that's why you added this to the level, because this is going to be
Right.
very level specific,
Yes.
as opposed to the other stuff which could be translated to a new level.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So there's a variable that we're targeting, which is kind of our camera, and then we're just going through and saying, hey, find the current position of the camera and set it to this new position, and that's all that camera position does. And there's some logic behind it too. So if we're clicking, again, like little kid fingers, clicking really fast, it doesn't just snap the camera. It's still a smooth transition. And then the final one that we have in this level blueprint is whenever we click this guy, that's just a cinematic sequence. That's all that it is. But it's not pre-rendered because I can still change everything in real time. I can still animate it. So, and that's actually being controlled right here. Again, we just created a new custom event so we can target it. But it's simply just saying, I want you to find this guy, which is our road bike sequence. Right here. And we'll go into this later too.
So you created the cinematic? It wasn't an algorithm or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Yeah, and that's what all these are. It's just different shots. Again, I think we've got this covered later this year that we'll go through. But simply by just doing shot takes, it's very traditional film stuff. I had different. that's what that's what all of this mess was. All of these cameras here. Those are the individual shots that I'm doing. And the reason for that, I just wanted some different focal lengths. I wanted some different blurring effects. Like I think you guys have seen this before. I'll do this. A little bit wider the lens, but then I'm pushing the focus distance. It's just much easier to control than trying to animate a camera and then over one frame snap it to another one. And so through this sequence, which I think, did I open it here? It's just simply rolling through our shots. So, but yeah, that's all that we're doing in our level blueprint with this guy. It's simply just, we're finding that cinematic camera, we're binding it so now the player's camera assumes the camera of our cinematic sequence. And then we've got a couple different things in here just with conditions. Again, we'll cover this later. But it just simply says, hey, if it's playing and I click the button again, stop my cinematic. So that way we don't lock the player to like you have to sit through the whole cinematic, because sometimes that sucks. And if it's not playing, go ahead and just start at the beginning and play through. So that's it. That's all that's in our level blueprint.
So you have 5 cameras plus the cinematic.
Correct.
Okay, because I know from playing with third person, the character has its own camera.
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, I program it to have its own character based on a spring arm, so it's behind them.
That's that logic right there. So what I'm saying, one of my other pins here is that I want to get the player controller, and I want to set its view, its camera, to this player cam. So again, I'll come back to this. Let me see if I can find this in the level. So our player cam looks like a lot of logic. All that is there's broken out touch control, moving our camera around, moving the cursor, being able to zoom in and out, and then limitations and focus. That's all it is. It's just the camera logic to control when we play. Now I'm using the mouse, but this event, scroll wheel, going in and out, and then if I switch, it's just the logic for smoothness.
Is that you?
Yep, that's that attach audio sound in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So to answer your question, that's what is happening here. It's just when we initialize, I'm saying, hey, don't use the default camera. I want you to use my camera. And that's it. Cool. Okay. I think that covers all of the blueprint setup, the logic behind it, and integrating it into the level. Question time. User time. Say it one more time. I didn't do too bad. And I didn't sound like an idiot. So like I said, if there's anything to take out from, I did all of that. Which again, I was very proud of. Skylar probably knows this and he can laugh. It has been hot on my priority list to learn how to do blueprints, particularly from a artist blueprint level, so I can understand a little bit better. I'm not a programmer by trade, but blueprints makes it a lot easier for me. So, cool.
So you work on the art and all the visuals, and other people do the blueprints and take what you
other people much smarter than me. Yeah, my primary forte with our studio is management level, project management, and then artistry based stuff. I am a senior level artist by trade, so a lot of more in-depth artistry stuff. And programming, nah.
Do you do like the animation side of the art, or kind of like still
minimal? Yeah, we've got a dedicated animator on our team that does.
Wheels spinning around. It's like, okay, make the wheel look great, and then someone else makes it.
Well, the animation system, especially in Unreal, even from the announcement of GDC, is becoming very, very robust. To where it would be, if somebody wanted to go into animation, I'd say definitely, if it was my own kid, because there's a lot of cool things you can do, especially a lot of automation now. So the character's responding, so you don't have to manually animate every individual component. They're doing a lot of automated things, which is really cool. But now you're talking about more of a technical artist than traditional animator. So, cool. Okay. Okay. So with that, I'm going to open up for question. Like I said, Skylar's here too. So if we want to, if you want to ask him any questions too, we can do that.
One question I'm going to start with.
Yes.
When I tried to create a new project, it presented me the option of a C++ project or a blueprint project.
Yep.
I don't understand what the choice is and what my limitations are with whichever way I go.
Okay.
This is a blueprint?
I'll bring Skylar up too so we can talk
There's
about it. So with the C++ project and with the Blueprint project, you can still do blueprints, absolutely. The difference with C++ is that when it goes to create those project files, you will see you will now have a full engine code, or you'll have more things exposed to you on the C++ side, to the point where when you go to package or compile your project, you have to open the Visual Studio file and compile the C++ project. With the Blueprints one, you don't have to. What it does is it still targets your build that you got from the marketplace with the Blueprint one, and so then you're not actually targeting the engine files. Does that make sense?
So I would not be able to do code in the C++ version, and can I take that version of the engine and check that in somewhere and have my animator who has no install of Visual Studio, can he use that?
So two answers to that one. The first question being, repeat that again. If I'm developing and I make changes to the engine version, the C++ version, does my animator, who will never touch code, have to also have Visual Studio in order to be able to test my stuff? Technically, no, unless it comes time to compile. Then he would have to have Visual Studio.
And how would I know whether he needs to compile?
He'll know because when he goes to click and do something that says, hey, it needs to be compiled, then you
Right.
So either way, he has to be ready to compile at any time.
Yes and no. So
So
for
he
example,
would need to compile, or you have to provide him the compiled project once you have it completed.
yeah. So like for example, because we do this a lot at our studio, because we do a lot of front source stuff. So that's actually downloading the GitHub version, which is full source code access to everything.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is we have just a dedicated machine, that's that big Xeon one, because it chunks through stuff really quickly. And what we do is we bring all the engine, we establish the project, and we compile it. And then once we compile it, we have a guide for it because we know which files need to go over, which don't. And then we version those, we put them up on the file server. That means anybody who's on our team will pull that project. It's already pre-compiled. It's everything. All the binaries are up to the same, hash code.
Okay, so there is a way to
Yeah.
make it self-contained for a non-programmer to not need to compile things.
Absolutely. In fact, actually, Skylar can speak to this one because he's working on a project currently where he's doing some C++ code manipulation and he's compiling. But he can push his changes and say, like our animator, he just grabs the latest. It grabs everything that Skylar's compiled without having to compile on his.
Okay, great. That was scaring the pants off of me because I did not understand that. Because all of the things that you find online all say, go here and make a new source file, and I'm just like, well, wait a minute, I thought I had to make this choice up front which way I was going to go. What's going on
Yeah,
here?
the internet is already full of terrorists, so it can scare you.
Also, if you start with Blueprint, you can just right-click on the Blueprint solution and generate the Visual Studio solution off of that.
I will say this, yeah.
I agree on better than I experienced now for some reason.
Oh, okay. To answer that one, that's actually a great thing because if this is something that we always consider when we start a project. If you think at any point in time you need to manipulate the source engine code, just build from source. You may only have to compile once, and that's it. For example, on the art side, as we're adding new content, we never touch anything that requires generation of never. So we may only generate that project once, recompile it, and that's it. But it's still there, it's still accessible. We have one of the situations, and I think they've gotten better with subsequent engine builds, that if we start with a Blueprint project, but then decided to go to source, it gets a little dicey. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. More than not, we've actually run into problems where it'll pop up a little one that says, hey, you need to compile the binaries for this. You say, sure, go ahead and build. 20 minutes later, failed. So then you get back to the point where you're just in the same process of having to open the solution, go in, actually build the project, but then you're you're pulling out parts and pieces from, oh, this is a marketplace build, and then I'm going to download the C++ dependencies. So really the safe way to do this is just, if you think you're going to touch source code, build from source.
And touching source code, if I'm just trying to add logic, let's say I'm and this is the question I asked you, I want to add logic to speak to a custom game server of mine that requires messing with C++ because at that point, because I want to create new nodes. Am I following that correctly?
You're saying, so if you wanted to put that game logic in, you would need a source build?
Would I need a source build at that point?
What do you think, Skylar?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably would. If you have to write any kind of code in C++, then you want your project to be built based on that rather than Blueprint.
Okay.
Blueprint can handle quite a bit of stuff, but there are some limitations, things that are handled on the back end of the engine that you can't quite touch with Blueprint.
Okay. I figured that it was a pretty clear engine that you could do a lot, but you know, it's again that right tool for the right job, and I'm constantly dealing with situations where I need access to a MySQL database or a SQLite database locally on my machine or on my phone, and that kind of thing is not what you're going to see out of a stock engine.
Yeah, I will say this, that if you end up having to go that route where you're starting to build stuff from source, this goes for anybody, I have a complete guide that I actually wrote specifically for file version. So you only push what is needed to the server. I've even got a script that runs on Perforce that will automatically scan when you add those files for like your CS projects, your .dlls to set the proper right permissions. For example, like writable in workspace. So it's good to go. That's something that we will probably won't cover that here, but that's many trials and errors.
Yeah, that answers the biggest question I've been facing just even trying to get into this engine, is because it asks that question up front, but without any knowledge of, you go searching for knowledge of this specific thing.
That's really the general rule. If you know you're going to have to be accessing engine level stuff, do a C++ project. If you're doing something like this where the project configurator where we knew we weren't going to be doing anything outside of blueprints, just do blueprints. And that made this fun too because, for example, when our animator had to work on this, he didn't have to pull any of the engine. It was just literally the project, which was the config file, the content, and then the actual new project. That's all I had to send him. That's all I had in version. So it was super light, super mobile. Now, granted, if I'm working on this in a marketplace build of 4.19, I think we build it in, he's just got to make sure he has 4.19 downloaded on his machine. And that was it. Yes.
Can you write C++ scripts if you're in blueprint mode?
I'll let Skylar kind of answer this one. So, blueprints and C++ are two separate languages. Now, granted,
no, the project would need to be enabled for C++ for you to add any source code to it.
Which is what you were telling me a minute ago.
Right. So you don't have to, like mine, I do create C++ projects, but I'm not messing with the engine. I'm just using the default engine. I'm using it for like the character class. So, because I'm doing a third person.
Actually,
you don't necessarily need to edit the
Right.
engine code. If you're adding C++ code of any kind, it still needs to be a C++ project. And that would be under your project source rather than engine source.
Right.
Yeah, and I think too, we've encountered this as well. There are some things that you do in the engine, even on C++ projects, that don't require a full recompile of the project. And is that correct, Skylar? I'll just make sure I'm not bullshitting that one.
Yeah, so for instance, if you added your own project source code, but you haven't actually messed anything with the engine, and you just changed one of your project source files, you won't have to recompile the entire engine again, just the modified project code.
Yeah. But I should probably dispel the myth too, because recompiling sounds like, and you guys are probably, if you've done it before, it sounds scary and daunting, but the process that we've done, and again, I got down to a science, I can recompile, like I can add, say for example, PS4 SDK. I can integrate that into the engine, do a full recompile, and push to Perforce in 35 minutes. And then so that way, by that time, everybody can just pull the latest, they have everything. So it's a pretty, I say fairly quick process. Again, that's on a robust machine. It's just as quick as your disk space and CPU cores. But it's not a very daunting task when you really look into it. Any other questions? Ask now because I'm not the programmer. I said too, if anybody's got any questions in chat too, Brooke's watching those.
That was my largest barrier to entry, and that I
That's it.
finally.
That was easy.
That's the thing, and that's what I've been finding the hardest to deal with in this engine is that simple questions don't have simple answers. Your experience creates simple answers, but as you said, you had to earn those answers. And yes, and I'm sorry, I'm still of the this is supposed to make my job easier, not harder. So I need answers now, and I'm used to being able to Google any problem I have, and 6 other people have already had that problem.
So I will say this, and I'll give you some keys on this one. I'm not dogging Unity, but I am because obviously this isn't sponsored or whatnot. But no, I'm partial to Unreal because it's what we do. But it's like this. And what I mean by that is Unity is really easy to get into, but it has no power at the end sustained. You end up getting into having to create your own custom classes, do all these different things, and it becomes grueling and terrible towards the end. I know from experience, so I can speak to that. Whereas Unreal is like, I guess I should have done this. It's like a huge mountain at the start. It's very, very daunting. But as you start to get more and more into it, it becomes way easier. I will say this. Coming up over this next year, this is verified from source, so you can count this one. Epic is putting a lot of resources into training materials. And what I mean by that is enterprise level training materials. So it's like not just a YouTube video here and there, it's full on from start to finish creating things. There's a huge initiative. I don't have details on exactly what they're going to cover, but I can tell you the breadth of it is filling in those patches where they know some people are having trouble just getting spun. So that's coming down the pipe. Secondly, if you guys do decide to go the route, say for example that you are starting a project, it's a serious project, you're going to release commercially. Unreal has available what is called the UDN, and I think it's still considered Unreal Developer Network. It is the private side of support with Epic. So you've got the forums, you've got Google, right? Like you've got the public-facing things, which are fairly good, but they can be not as nice. UDN is the private side where you actually have a representative from Epic that you can ping and say, hey, we're having trouble with this. It's all under NDA, so they say, hey, we've got another student to work with, they'll do this work. They have people that obviously work on projects there that will come in and help you. So they're very, very good. It's one of those that I think is probably one of the best things I like about Epic. Their support channels, they're very, very supportive. They don't look at you and go, ha, you're stupid. Like, you know, they're like, sure, yeah, what do you need help with? Yeah, we'll come in and we'll do everything we can.
Yeah, they're really nice and responsive. Yeah.
So comparing this with Unity,
I don't think you want to say that so often here.
well, I don't know. I'm still learning these. They seem to be the 2 most popular. How different are the engines? If Unity, that'd be a good way to get started to learn easy stuff, and then switch to Unreal after you'll learn some of the.
You don't want to do that.
You don't. Okay.
You don't want to do that. If you want the graphic quality that Unreal can offer, start there. Because once you learn Unity, it makes it, one is a subtractive model, the other one is an additive model. With Unreal, you get the kitchen sink. You get everything. And that's what he was describing, the very steep initial learning curve. And you get the kitchen sink, but that also means you have the entire kitchen sink to play with. The problem with Unity is that you get a very minimalistic, and you add the pieces you want. And the thing is that over time, you find that you can't get the pieces you want. You have to keep building it yourself. That's what he was just saying about it. As you keep ending up hitting this wall of, okay, I want this other thing. Well, heck, it doesn't exist in the engine. There's no engine-wide standard for this. So now you're not only having to learn the main engine, but you also have to learn this particular package, and this particular package to do everything that Unreal has from the get-go.
It gets easier, trust me.
Yeah, again, it's the kitchen sink problem. Once you understand how to navigate the kitchen sink, which is why I am very grateful of these intro that you are doing.
Cool.
So I guess the question I have is, and I'm circumventing the source, so that depending on what route you start down. So with other kinds of tools that I've used over the years, they've got a tool set that basically is a wrapper around the back-end code. And so if you choose to say that you want to start down the source code path, those wrappers still exist.
Yeah.
The source code is exposed.
So the beautiful part, and I can say this about Unreal, is you have 100% source code access.
Yeah.
As a counter to that crying, you have source code access. You have 10% source code access. Unreal is 100% source code access. And I think the second thing to that is, you know, again, I come from an artist background. Blueprints are still targeting back-end functions.
Yes.
Now, granted, they're not C++. Well, I shouldn't say they're not C++. They're, I think, visual scripting, but they still call some of those C++ functions. But you can still go C++ and just have full exposure. Blueprints is kind of that middle nicety in between.
But the blueprints are not, they're not generating source code in C++ in the background.
No.
So for instance, if you built a blueprint and it said, show me the source code that I just generated,
Gotcha.
you would not get.
I don't know actually on that.
You wouldn't want to, because
Yeah.
the whole point of how blueprints are designed is the concept of they will optimize it for you, like just-in-time
No, I
compiling.
believe there's a feature where it can generate out the C++ code for your blueprints, convert a blueprint project completely into C++. I don't believe that the generated code is that optimized, and we've never actually used this tool. The blueprint assets, the blueprint code exists as its own, not in C++ at all, even in the final versions of the project.
You're not losing efficiency by using blueprints.
That's not the issue to me. The thing is, in instances like this, what I've seen is that you build something using a tool set.
This isn't Windows. This isn't layers on layers on layers.
Believe me, I'm not thinking about Windows. So you generate that, and it's, for instance, an HTML generator, and basically, so you can get in a browser, and you can pull the browser, and you can debug the generated HTML code, and you can see where the disconnects are between what you want to happen and what you're getting.
Now, you can
No.
debug a blueprint.
Yeah, there is. So, for example, I'll see if I can do this real fast. So, if I go into, say, like plain selected viewport, and I think, where am I controlling this roguelike logic? And I've got, let's say I've got variation 3 here. You notice the yellow box? So it's showing me in real time what happens. So if I go in, let's say I play, this may be a little difficult. It may do it. I go in and say 1, 2, 3. See how it just really quickly there just showed? So if I click it again.
And there is a pause, a stop, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah.
Right. And it simulates, so you can.
So you see how it's cascading through there? So you can still, in a way, debug blueprints. And there's other things too, and yeah, frame skipping, resuming, stopping, ejecting the player so you can see what's happening while it's in there. You can also put other logic in there as well, different commands that say like, hey, stop here, print string out, find out what's happening. So you still have exposure to that.
Yeah, console log.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one thing too that's probably worth mentioning that might be a little confusing is to go like, do I need to do all or one? Right? Do I need to do just all blueprints, or do I need to do all C++? The format guys, they actually use a mix of both, and really their determining factor for that is just what are we trying to do here? You know, like networking layer stuff where you've got 50 players. Yeah, we're going to go the C++ route because it's faster, it's quicker. We know we're going to need a lot more control. But say, for example, you know, there's time of day where it's going through. We don't necessarily need that in C++ because the tick function of that isn't updating every frame. It's, you know, maybe once every 30 frames, go this, you know, because you don't need that fidelity. That's done in blueprints. So you can have a hodgepodge mix in Unreal, and that's what's the beauty about it.
And so they use the C++ version.
All right.
Yeah.
There's
Start there, both pieces are
on the marketplace, there's a asset called Action RPG that they threw out on how to play, and it's basically like this guy with the axe beating demons that are popping up. But that shows a blend of the blueprint and C++. And I think they did a GDC talk on it.
They might have, yeah. Yeah, that's a big one that they've done case studies in the past, projects they've released. But prior to the Action RPG, Epic found that they had people that would download the projects, but then they only covered so much. They're thinking, well, we didn't think, you know, this was going to be a hot topic, and they had like a flurry of questions. So the Action RPG one was designed from the get-go to be a work in progress, so you could follow along with it. But it would be a start-to-finish completed project that is, I think it is currently, or it's going to be released on the actual mobile, so you can actually play it. It's a free game.
Yeah, I think that was their last target, and then they were going to be done with it.
Yeah, so that's a great project.
But it's got cinematics in there, the HUD control for swinging the axe and that and such. So.
Cool. Any other questions? Sweet. Yeah, I made it.
Are you planning on putting a cost database associated to this template?
It is possible, yeah. You could just do a data table, and actually, part of that could actually be targeted to an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I did not put it in here, primarily because I originally had intended to do it with this project. I didn't because where we ended up taking this one was just more of a beauty. The idea was if you put it in, like, say, like, for example, it was like Ferrari or McLaren or anything that's like a higher end dollar thing. We didn't put cost in it, we just simply wanted you to fall in love with all the different stuff. But is it possible? Gotcha. We won't cover that.
Okay.
But I will tell you this, it's very much the same way that you're just putting in item costs for things. And you can set up a data structure with, you know, variation 1, 2, and 3 as certain things. And when you plug in that logic, I'm showing you version 3, and this is the cost.
Yep.
Cool, okay. Awesome. Well, that concludes this, so we didn't do too bad. So at this point, you guys are free to stick around, ask questions. We do need to be out like 8:30, but other than that concludes this one. Yay! I should look too. I think just so you guys are aware for next week. Let's see if I've got it. Next week, we're actually going to be going through the camera setup and integration. So that's it. Yeah, I'll see if I can put a little bit more. But that's just going to go through, just show kind of logic that we put with it. Doing the, oh yeah, that's right. We're doing the, I think the, oh no, we're not doing cinematic sequence with that one. But yeah, we'll show how to get all the camera integrated and probably do the UI with that as well. Cool. Okay. Awesome. And we'll sit here silently.
Yep.
Yep. Just
Don't talk. It's not silent.
I brought a lot of coffee, so if anybody wants coffee.